Hey, welcome to Gary's Shortlist podcast. Today we're having a chat with Nathan Charles. This is a great one. Nathan is the CEO of Rugby Western Australia. Nathan is also a 4 times representative Wallaby for Australia. And Nathan is also the National Ambassador of Cystic fibrosis, and he has a chat about that with us. Sit back and enjoy Nathan Charles. Thank you. Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with Gary's Shortlist podcast today. For the listeners out there, Nathan Charles is the CEO of Rugby WA here in Australia. Nathan is also a household name with Rugby, represented Australia with the Wallabies on 4 occasions. Nathan, thank you so much, mate. How are you going over there?
Hey, Gaz, thanks for having me on. And geez, you're very kind. And I think you've pushed the parcel a little bit by saying household name. But look, that's a very kind compliment to start the day for me. Yeah, things are going, I think things are going quite well over in WA in the current time. We're living life as normal as possible, albeit with its challenges. Fortunately, we're doing much better than some of the other states at the moment. So, look, I can't complain too much.
And you've been in the role now for how long, Nath?
Yeah, started in February 2021. So probably about 8 months now. And it's just been an absolute whirlwind of a time. I didn't think I'd be in a position like this so soon after retiring from my professional career. And, very fortunate to have been successful, got supporters that are helping me through, plenty of mentors, and people to lean on, I guess, every day to get me through some challenging situations. But, upon reflection, there's been a lot that's happened this year by design and then by, organically as well. So you have to deal and roll with the punches as they come, and you have to ensure that everything moves along as the way you want it to. But it has been a challenging and eye-opening time, but a time that I've just grown significantly and enjoyed thoroughly.
Good on you, mate. And once again, congrats on your appointment. I think you're a fantastic fit for the role, and I'm sure we'll see some really good things to come out of WA. Mate, for the listeners out there, primarily in the construction industry, I'd just like to let them know that you and I have known each other for quite some time, but we were really fortunate to have you come and speak at the Construction Safety Alliance when I was a chairman there, and I think you've got a lot of synergy in regard to construction and your story. Now, for the listeners that don't know your story, Nathan, it's a very, very interesting story. Listeners out there, sit back and Nathan perhaps will just brief us on your past and how it sort of floated into your career.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess the story that you're referring to is the fact that I was born with cystic fibrosis, the most common genetic condition known in Caucasions worldwide. So cystic fibrosis is a condition that affects the respiratory and digestive system by creating a thick, sticky mucus that causes irreversible lung damage and in some cases an early death. And also affects the digestive system to, doesn't all work as well as probably what it should, and getting appropriate vitamins through foods and whatnot. So supplements have to be taken and an abundance of medications. And I was diagnosed at the age of 3 months old. And at that point in time, my mum and dad were told that, to make the most of your time with Nathan because there's a good chance he won't make it past 10. And at 32 years of age, I'm still putting my nose up at those doctors saying I wasn't going to get past 10, let alone be the only professional elite contact sporting person to play international rugby or for their country. So, I'd like to think by me following my passion, which is rugby, and with also the attachment of cystic fibrosis, I can provide some source of inspiration or motivation for people not only that are affected by cystic fibrosis, but those without that are facing adversity and challenges in life. Because, as we'll probably discuss a bit later, everyone faces adversity and challenges in life, whether it's physical, intellectual, or mental. There are significant challenges that we all go through, and I think you should not be defined by the condition that you may or experience that you suffer from, but instead how you decide to bounce back and get back into life, I guess.
Mate, that is one amazing story, and I've got two things to add. I know that you're a National Ambassador for Cystic Fibrosis, and I think you would certainly be giving a lot of, particularly younger people, the guidance and the role model that you can be for them in regards to where you are. How's your health now, Nathan? Out of interest, that now you're not playing rugby.
Yeah, it's look, you have your up and down days. Naturally, the older you get, the more it declines. But I think the transition from being physically active every day to not, there's a real cognizant fact that you have to go, exercise has kept me healthy all these years, mentally and physically. So I've got to make a conscious decision to go, well, I've got to do something. And I just love keeping fit. So I still train a lot. I feel like my health's in relatively good position at the moment. But like with anything, a simple cold or flu will just snowball into something a lot worse. So I'm pretty health conscious in regards to my hygiene, and in this particular moment as well with COVID, it was a pretty unknown and a bit scary time around the impacts if I was to catch it. Being a respiratory condition itself, like, I was considered high risk. So but I've managed to keep quite healthy and fortunate throughout this period of time. Fantastic,
mate. Great to hear. So Nathan, perhaps you could give us a bit of a snapshot from, when you were schoolboy rugby guy in Sydney, you had your parents supporting you all the way through to, your professional journey. Perhaps you can give us a bit of a snapshot, and I love the part of your career when you ended up in Europe and playing for Australia.
Yeah, well, ever since I could walk, I knew all I ever wanted to be was a Wallaby, and that was the catch cry at that time in the 90s.
It was, wasn't it? I want to be a Wallaby.
It was. That's exactly right. So that's all I grew up remembering what I wanted to be, and I think there's a story of when I was actually watching my brother Matt's game for the Warringah Tigers, and I was on the sideline with my nana, and I was pulling on her hand saying, I want to play, but I think I was 3 or 4 at the time, and she just told me I was too young. So as soon as I was of appropriate age, and I think mum and dad put me in a year younger anyway, just to get me into it, I played rugby and absolutely loved it. And I've played my whole life, been around it my whole life, and at a roughly an early age, I was quite fortunate to be identified, as someone with potential to go further. That aside, I just loved it, so I wanted to put everything in it myself. But it was probably when I was 15 years old when I got my first contract with the Canterbury Bulldogs Rugby League. That sort of made it all a bit real, going, well, this could be a career for me. And then, went through the pathway of Australian Schoolboys Rugby Union. I went to university, played there, signed with the Brumbies down in Canberra, and then signed with the Western Force in WA for a 2-week contract. It ended up turning into 7 years, 7 seasons. And then, in that time, managed to make my debut for the Wallabies, which was just out of this world. And then in 2016, made the move to Europe, went to France for a little bit, played with one of the powerhouse clubs over there in Clermont, and they happened to win the top 14 that year, which was just unbelievable. And then following that, I went to Bath in England for about 18 months. And then, at 29 years of age, I just realised I'd had enough, physically, mentally, emotionally. I was just absolutely cooked. So I decided to hang up the boots and make the transition into the real world, as some would say.
And with your injuries, I know you had shoulder injuries, and perhaps you can just tell us. I guess the reason I ask you about that is that in construction, there's plenty of people out there in the construction industry that are carrying injuries and probably, lay awake at night thinking, if this doesn't get much better, what does my career look like? And I think that's where your story rung with me.
Yeah, I had, you have niggles all throughout your career, but I had 3 major injuries that actually kept me out of the game for a period of, I think close to 20 months in my whole career. So it's a significant amount of time. First one was I just blew out my knee, just full knee reconstruction. So that took me out for 11 months. And that was my first major reconstruction and first time out of the game. And that hit me for 6. That was really tough. I really struggled to accept it. I struggled to understand, why me? I went through all the emotions and then got to the stage of going, you know what, just pull your head together. Like, you got to move forward and get to where you need to get to and do the hard work. So, initially for probably the first 6 weeks, I went into a pretty dark place, just trying to understand the injury, what it meant. It was a massive shock as well. So I'd actually done it in a game and then played on for another 5 or so minutes, not realising the extent of the damage. And then, was feeling pretty confident after the game. And then I went and got a scan by myself on a Sunday and just up the road actually from where I'm sitting now. And they delivered the news to me that, mate, your knee's done. So that was just a huge shock to the system. And it was pretty hard to accept. But I got through that. I mentally grew from it as well. I dealt with some things and I actually came out of that a much better player and much better person. I went through a few personal things as well during that time. So I just grew from, I just grew as a person. And then the following year is actually when I made my debut for the Wallabies. So I came out of a serious injury and then ended up playing the best rugby of my life. Unfortunately, that was cut short again by another injury when I, in my last test match, which is hard to talk about, is when I tore my pec off the bone. You're at the top of your game. I've just come from a major setback the year before. I've pushed through the barriers. I've got to the be-all and end-all, which is starting for your country against the All Blacks in a Bledisloe test match. So I thought I was just on top of the world. And then literally in a scrum in the 25th minute, I think it was, tear my pec off the bone and, mate, that was it. Again, played on for another 5 or so minutes before realising it's pretty painful, and then just walked up the tunnel and just broke down. It was just really heartbreaking to go through all that pain and effort and be on top of everything and then just have it torn away from you, literally. So that second injury really set me back big time, because there was an expectation there now of what I could do, where I was. And then when I returned back from that injury, I wasn't the same player. I put myself under a lot of pressure, didn't deal with it as well. I got external pressures as well from people, which made me come back sooner than what I was probably should have. And I just played. I played very average. I came back. I was busting my butt, but it wasn't being reflected in performances. My form was very poor, and then I was just in a bad space. And then the year after that, dislocated my shoulder and had to have a shoulder reconstruction. So it was sort of 4 years of just back-to-back injuries, and it was hard to manage after that. And after my last one, I just said, I've, got to do something different. And was, external pressures again, made me go to Europe. And then once I went there, I sort of just put a timeline on my career. I said, look, I'll give myself 2 years. And that's what I did. Went overseas for 2 years, had an absolutely cracking time. Can't say I played the best rugby, but I just really enjoyed the places I went to, the people I met and the experiences I had. And I wouldn't change those experiences for the world. But it was tough, but I learned a lot out of it. I learned what my body can do, what it can't do, and then obviously the mental challenges that are associated with all those setbacks. So hope that answers your question in a quick snapshot.
It does, Nathan. Thank you, and thanks for sharing quite personal journey, Nathan. So, how did you transition? Were you at that some period there were you thinking about, what do I do now? Like if I'm finished with rugby, you've played and concentrated on professional sport for most of your life, and then you're probably thinking, I need to go and get, as you said, a real job. And did that give you, I guess, somewhat a level of anxiety, thinking what's your career post rugby, and what did you do? Like, did you, obviously you didn't walk into a CEO role, or you must have taken some steps.
Yeah, Gaz, I did. And I was always very conscious of the fact that rugby is just a game, and probably those injuries taught me some lessons in the sense of, it is a business and you are just a number, and you're replaceable. So, the new flavour of the month comes in, and that's sport, that's professional sport, and that's okay. But as a player, you need to understand and accept that. So when it does happen to you, you just aren't blindsided. I'm a very aspirational kind of person, and I knew that, rugby, being a professional rugby player at the age of 19, you get paid more money than the average 19-year-old, and you get exposed to a better lifestyle and certain aspects due to the benefits of being a professional sports person. You get a taste of it, you don't want it to end. So my thought around that was, what do I need to do to maintain this lifestyle post rugby? So when I first left school, Dad said, you either get a job or you go to university, and if you go to university, we'll support you. So I was like, oh, well, I did want to go to uni. I went there and played rugby, and I lived there at college, and I was like, well, study as well. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I did what they called the rugby degree, which was arts and science. It was a bit of we'll just get you into uni. I was on a scholarship there, and then figure out your way. So, which I did. And then I ended up majoring in my degree majored in management and Australian history. And I failed some units along the way, but I quickly realised, I do or I don't like that. And then I'll never forget, I handed in my last ever assignment for that degree on the morning of Mad Monday in 2010. So I remember having to walk down the road at, I think, 9 or 10 a.m. on actually might have been even earlier, 8 a.m. The morning of Mad Monday, going to a backpackers to get some internet so I could send through and submit my assignment. And that was my last one ever. So I finished that in 2010, just as I was making professional. So I'd already done my first degree, which was great. And then throughout my career, I just made the most of opportunities, in the sense of, when you're an elite athlete and in a sport like rugby, you're so fortunate with the people that want to be a part of it. Sponsors, for example, people with a lot of money, with a lot of understanding, with a lot of network to get guidance from. So when we had sponsor days, I was always the one that would go around to sponsors and introduce myself, and even to this day, I'm still in contact with, I'd say, at least 40% of the people from that era, and some of my mentors today. So, and they've all pushed me in the right direction, provided me advice, and introduced me to people, which has just guided me in my life. And it was actually one of my business mentors that we were discussing, post rugby, and it was probably in 2015 or something. I remember having a good hour-long chat to him, and I said, mate, I'm thinking about doing an MBA, or that there's a project management master's. I'm not really too sure what to do. And he was the one, when I was talking to him, he said, well, nowadays with skills and skills and qualifications, I guess, a lot of employers are looking for, hard skills. So project management is something that you can use across every industry, and was quite broad, but also could be narrowed down. So he was the one saying, I'd suggest you do your project management, which I did. And I finished that my last couple of years of playing professional rugby. Again, one of my last exams was actually in a Starbucks in the middle of Coventry, just with my headphones in, doing an online exam. So, I just made do with the situation I was in, and I made sure to always further and educate myself, because one day my rugby career would end. and I wanted to be as prepared as possible to move into the next chapter of my life. And I guess from studying that Masters of Project Management, I then took a liking to risk management through my network, and the rugby network. Got in touch with someone who worked in oil and gas, health and safety. We sat down, we hit it off, and we were like, well, why don't we start up a consultancy, health and safety consultancy, which we did, which is called Veritas RSW. It's been running since 2018. It's something that is very much a side thing for us at the moment, in the sense of both of us sort of take a back step, but we have other people leading the way. And that was great, finish my career, start up a business, have those learnings, do it with someone, but not have to fully depend on that as your income. It took the pressure off as well. And then, I had that choice of, do I want to go down health and safety as a career, or do I want to stay in sport? And, sport was just overriding in the sense of enjoyment. Made that decision, and a couple of years in sports administration in a different sport, and then this opportunity at rugby came along. So it's been a bit of a journey, but I definitely felt like I put myself in the best position to get to where I am.
But it's I think the synergy between your story and perhaps some of our listeners today is that you can have that side hustle, perhaps you might call it, with Veritas, the risk management firm, whilst doing whatever else you're doing at the same time, which is great. But I think also the learnings about maybe not waiting to D-Day to then decide, oh, what do I do now? You planted some seeds, and I think you rightly point out that you're networking and keeping really close to the people that you've been fortunate enough to meet over a long period of time. Is that it also, it's funny how things happen, isn't it? It can be at a barbecue, or it can be at the pub that someone says, hey Nath, we met ages ago, and are you interested in having a chat about X? And I think I've done the same in my career. Even with people that I've worked with in the past, I try to keep in touch with them at some point. And it's not for any other reason that life is a really interesting thing. It's a small world, and it's interesting how your path can change. And I guess your career and my career are somewhat similar, except I never picked up a football, but I was in safety management thinking, what is my life after safety management? Because I knew that I couldn't do safety management, for forever. And over my last couple of years of doing safety management, I decided, I'd love to explore the recruitment world, because I'm still in my construction circles. I still get to talk to people about construction where I'm passionate about. And of course, safety gets thrown in the mix as well. But that's interesting. So no more study now, Nathan? You think you've done with your study?
Oh, look, I don't think I'd go back and do a formal degree as per, but I constantly do professional development days. I think it's really important to keep pushing yourself and learning different things. Like, recently I did a 2-day course on financial forecasting, just to, upskill myself in that area and just to remind myself of a few key points. So I think that's very important, to just keep pushing yourself and challenging those areas and just refreshing or whatever. But yeah, I think in terms of degrees, I might leave just to the 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that your lovely wife is a professional sports person as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, beautiful wife Verity. She is a professional netball player for the West Coast Fever and the Australian Diamonds, actually. So she, haven't seen her for a couple of months now, which has been a bit of a challenge. Obviously, COVID. They've been on the East Coast playing their season, and now they're going into camp with the Australian team and playing a 3-test series against England. So, she's just an absolute gun. I'm a number one fan, and just love what she's doing. And she just provides that bit of balance to my life as well. Being, we understand the pressures of professional sport, what they are, and how we can best support each other to get through.
Yeah. And in terms of rugby, Nathan, is there anything you can tell us secretly in terms of what we can expect potentially in rugby in the next, short term or long term in Australia? Is there anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, look, I think rugby in Australia has gone through a lull for quite a few years. I think the current administration at the top in Rugby Australia is of high quality, and I think we'll move our way forward. We've just had a good series against France, and then a couple of good wins against South Africa. So I think there's some good players coming through. Just need some stability. And then from a grassroots level in WA, we have such a great opportunity here to grow the game, albeit it's a WA stronghold. An AFL stronghold in WA. I think there's a really good opportunity to grow the game across, the male and female component.
Yeah, terrific. And look, I just lastly, Nathan, I'd really thank you for your time. It's for our listeners here, it's a Sunday. That we're sitting here with Nathan because Nathan's been flat out and we've been talking for a long time to try and make this happen. And I just would really like to thank you on behalf of myself and the listeners for taking some time out on your Sunday. Mate, I hope you get a chance to put your feet up for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for coming on board Gary's Shortlist podcast. And I'd encourage our listeners to watch the space in rugby.
Thanks for having us on, Gaz. I appreciate it. And thanks to all the listeners.
Thanks, Nathan. Thank you very much.